My name's Spencer. I'm 32, and if you told 15-year-old me that one day I'd be the successful one in the family, I'd have laughed you right off your bike. Back then, I was the quiet kid with hand-me-downs 2 sizes too big, the one who ate lunch alone and didn't complain when he got left behind. I was the second son, after Nathan, my older brother, who, according to everyone from our kindergarten teacher to our great-aunt June, was destined for great things. Nathan got the varsity jacket, the loud applause at graduation, the spot at Dad's mechanic shop. Me? I got out. Not in a dramatic suitcase in the rain kind of way, more like a slow fade-out. I went to college on a scholarship, got a finance degree, and quietly clawed my way into a career most of my family didn't understand, let alone respect. Growing up, our family was fine, I guess. Blue-collar through and through. Dad ran a small but reliable auto shop, and Mom worked part-time at the school cafeteria. They did what they could with what they had. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we weren't dysfunctional either, until you looked closer. Nathan, older by 3 years, learned early how to charm his way through anything. He wasn't cruel exactly, just entitled in the way only someone praised his whole life could be. Whenever something went wrong, the family shielded him. Crashed the car? Boys will be boys. Forgot Mom's birthday? He's just stressed. I learned to live in the silence between his loud mistakes. When I moved to another city after college, it was like disappearing from their radar. I came home for the big holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, but even then, it always felt like I was a guest at someone else's family gathering. Nathan would make little digs masked as jokes. Look who finally decided to visit. Or, must be nice, rolling in Wall Street money. For the record, I wasn't on Wall Street. I worked as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm, lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, and still drove the same beat-up Civic I bought in college. But to Nathan, the idea that I wasn't scraping by like the rest of the family made me a punchline. Still, despite the jabs, I stayed connected. I called Mom once a week, even if it was just to hear her talk about her garden or some neighbor's dog drama. I sent cards on their birthdays. I offered to help with bills once or twice, which Dad always turned down with a gruff, "We're managing just fine." I respected that. I knew their pride. I knew mine too. So I kept grinding, working long hours, saving aggressively. When the pandemic hit and a lot of people lost their footing, I doubled down. I invested smart, took some calculated risks, and started building a real portfolio. By the time I was 30, I had enough for a down payment on a home, and not just for me. See, there's a quiet kind of ache that comes from knowing your parents spent their whole lives giving, only to face retirement with aching knees, fading dreams, and a house that creaked louder than they did. I couldn't stomach it anymore. So last year, I started looking. Nothing fancy, just something clean, accessible, and comfortable. A place where they could age with dignity, maybe even enjoy themselves a little. I settled on a charming 1-story ranch-style house in a peaceful neighborhood about 20 minutes from where they lived. Big backyard, modern appliances, a wraparound porch that caught the evening sun just right. $500,000, all in. I paid cash, told them it was an investment property I didn't want to rent out just yet, then handed them the keys and said, "Happy retirement." Mom cried. Dad went quiet in that way he does when emotion might crack his voice. Nathan? Nathan didn't say much at all, just nodded and said, "That's generous." It didn't bother me at the time. I wasn't doing it for praise. I was doing it because it felt right, because they deserved a soft landing after years of hard ground. We all moved some furniture in together. Me, Nathan, his wife Amelia, even a couple of his buddies. It was a good day, a rare one. Everyone smiling, no one sniping. But something changed after that. It was subtle at first. Calls from Mom grew shorter. She sounded tired. Not physically, more like emotionally drained, like she was choosing her words carefully. When I asked how the new place was, she said things like, "Oh, we're adjusting," or "It's nice, just taking time to settle in." I offered to come visit, maybe bring lunch. She hesitated. "Maybe next week, sweetie. We've just got a lot going on right now." That wasn't like her. Mom loved when I dropped by. She used to make a whole afternoon of it. Tea, sandwiches, those lemon cookies I could never replicate. Something was off. Then there was the time I FaceTimed her and saw that she was outside, wrapped in a shawl, sitting on one of the patio chairs. I asked if everything was okay inside. She gave me a tight smile and said, It's just loud in there sometimes. I didn't push. I should have. Nathan hadn't called me in weeks either, which wasn't unusual, but still. After the house thing, I figured maybe we'd turned a corner. Maybe we weren't best friends, but at least we were family. I was wrong. A month after they moved in, I decided to stop by unannounced. Nothing dramatic. Just a surprise visit with some takeout and a bottle of wine Mom liked. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that begged for a slow meal and good company. I pulled into the driveway, noticed a few unfamiliar cars parked out front, and felt my first twinge of unease. Maybe they were having guests. Maybe I was crashing something. But as I walked up the steps, I heard laughter, loud, boisterous, unfamiliar. I rang the doorbell. No answer. After a beat, I just let myself in. It was, after all, my house. The living room was packed. A group of women I didn't recognize were standing around with wine glasses, oohing and awing over the decor. Amelia, my brother's wife, was leading them around like a real estate agent. "This is the formal dining room," she was saying, "though we're thinking of knocking out that wall for more space." One of the women gasped. "Oh, it's beautiful. You guys are so lucky." Amelia beamed. "Yeah, it's our new place. Finally upgraded." I stood frozen in the doorway, takeout bag still in hand. No one noticed me at first. Then someone, Nathan, walked out from the hallway, saw me, and smirked. Not smiled. Smirked. Well, look who's here." I didn't say anything at first. Just scanned the room again, like maybe I had walked into the wrong house. But no, there was the photo of Mom and Dad on the mantle. There was the ceramic rooster Mom had owned since I was a kid, now perched above the kitchen cabinets. My jaw clenched. "Where's Mom?" I asked. Nathan shrugged. "She's around." I walked past him, down the hall toward the laundry room. The door was slightly ajar, and inside I found her, Mom, sitting on a small folding stool, eyes red, hands in her lap. The dryer was running, muffling the noise from the party. She looked up when she saw me, startled. "Spencer, what's going on?" I asked, setting down the food. "Why are you in here?" She hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed. Finally, she whispered, "It's just easier this way." I didn't understand. Easier how? But before she could answer, Dad walked by, through the garage door, rubbing his eyes like he just woke up. He didn't notice me at first. Then he saw the food, saw me, and froze. "Dad, were you sleeping in the garage?" Another pause. Another tight-lipped smile. "It's cooler out there," he muttered. Something snapped inside me. I turned on my heel and stormed back into the living room. The women were laughing again. Amelia was showing off the pantry. Nathan had a beer in hand. I walked straight to the center of the room, pulled the deed out of my jacket pocket, because yes, I had brought it, thinking I might finally change the name over officially, and held it up. "Just so we're clear," I said loudly enough to silence the room. "This house belongs to Mom and Dad. Not you, not your wife, and definitely not your little real estate tour group." Every face turned to look at me. Dead silence. And Nathan? Nathan just looked at me with that same smirk and said, "It's only fair we get it now. They've had their turn." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at him. And that's when everything changed. I stood there in the middle of the living room, the deed in my hand, the weight of it suddenly heavier than I'd ever imagined. The silence stretched longer than it should have. One of the women coughed awkwardly. Another shifted her wine glass from one hand to the other. But all I could hear was the distant hum of the dryer down the hall and the dull thump of my own heartbeat in my ears. Nathan didn't flinch. That smirk stayed glued to his face like it was stitched on. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look embarrassed, or nervous, or caught. He looked amused, like I was a child stomping into the middle of his birthday party, demanding attention. And somehow that was worse than if he'd just gotten defensive or angry. "It's only fair we get it now," he repeated, this time with a lazy shrug. "They've had their turn." I turned slowly, scanning the room. Amelia wouldn't meet my eye. One of her friends, a woman with two perfect eyebrows and a designer handbag slung over her shoulder, gave me a once-over like I was the rude one for interrupting their wine and tour hour. "I bought this house for them," I said, quieter now, but every word was sharper. "They didn't ask for it. They didn't expect it. I did it because I wanted them to have something good, something safe. You." I turned to Nathan. "You had nothing to do with it." He tilted his head slightly, like he was humoring me. And yet, here we are. It was the smugness. That's what did it. Not the entitlement. Not even the blatant hijacking of the house. It was the arrogance. The absolute certainty that he could walk in, plant a flag, and claim something that wasn't his just because he believed he deserved it. "You're sleeping in the master bedroom, aren't you?" I asked him. Nathan leaned against the kitchen counter and sipped his beer. "We moved in when they started having trouble getting around." It just made sense. "Really?" "Because last I checked, Dad was sleeping on an air mattress in the garage." That got a few shocked gasps from the crowd. Amelia's lips parted, but nothing came out. Nathan didn't miss a beat. "Dad likes the garage. Says it's cooler out there." I stared at him. "You kicked our parents out of their own bedroom." "We didn't kick them out," Amelia said quickly, her voice shaking a little. "They offered. Spencer, they said it was fine." "They said it was fine," I repeated slowly, "because you made them feel like guests in their own home." "No one made them feel like anything," Nathan snapped. "If they wanted to speak up, they would have. But they didn't. So maybe you should think about why that is before you come in here like some knight in shining armor." I didn't answer him. Not right away. Because part of me knew he was right. Mom and Dad hadn't spoken up. But not because they were okay with it. Because they didn't want to start a war. Because they didn't know how. Because after a lifetime of enabling Nathan's behavior, they didn't believe anyone would take their side. Not even me. And the thing that stung most? They might have been right. I walked out of the room without another word. I found Mom still in the laundry room, now folding towels with the kind of mechanical care that made my chest ache. "Spencer," she whispered when she saw me. "I need the truth, Mom," I said, kneeling beside her. "Are you okay? Really?" She looked at me for a long moment. Her hand stilled. Then she closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Your father wanted to sleep in the garage. Said it didn't matter where he laid his head as long as we had peace." "And you?" I asked. "Where do you sleep?" She hesitated. "In the guest room. Sometimes the couch, if Amelia has friends over." My throat tightened. "They treat you like visitors in your own house." She didn't answer that. She just folded the towel and set it in the basket like she hadn't heard me. But she had. I could see it in the way her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. I stood and paced. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We didn't want to cause trouble," she said softly. "Your brother, he's struggling, Spencer." "With what?" "Lack of shame." She gave me a look, sharp and tired all at once. "He's got a family now. Amelia's trying to start her own business. They've been under pressure. We thought if we let them stay for a little while. They've moved in, Mom. They've taken over. They're telling people this is their house." She flinched at that, just slightly. "We didn't want to disappoint you." "Disappoint me?" I repeated, voice breaking a little. "You think I'd be disappointed in you for being kind? For letting your son bulldoze over your boundaries because you didn't want to start a fight?" She smiled, sad and tired. "You've always been the one who sees clearly, Spencer. Even when you were little. But not everything's that simple." Maybe it wasn't. But it also wasn't supposed to be this hard. I hugged her then, tightly, and whispered that I'd handle it. That she didn't have to live like this. That it wasn't fair. She didn't say anything. She just rested her cheek against my shoulder like she'd been waiting for someone to tell her that for a long, long time. Later that evening, I didn't go home. I booked a room nearby and sat with my laptop until midnight, going over every legal document I had. The deed was still in my name. I hadn't transferred it yet. Hadn't even filed the paperwork. The property taxes, the utility setup, the homeowner's insurance, it was all under my name. They couldn't claim squat. Not legally, but morally, emotionally. That was a whole different battlefield. The next week, things spiraled. I called Dad, asked him to meet me for lunch. He showed up looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. Bags under his eyes, stubble he usually kept clean-shaven, and a stiffness in his walk I hadn't noticed before. "Your brother's not a bad person," he said after I brought up the house again. "He's not a good one either," I replied. "Not when he's pushing you out of your own bed." Dad sighed. "It's not about beds. It's about peace. About letting things play out. But at what cost?" He didn't answer, just poked at his food like it had personally offended him. 3 days later, I got a text from Mom that shattered whatever patience I had left. "Do you know where the title paperwork is? Nathan said we need it for Amelia's business loan." I called her immediately. "What paperwork?" "The deed. The house deed. He said the bank wants to see proof of ownership for collateral." I was silent for so long she asked if the line had dropped. "No. I'm here," I said slowly. "Did you give it to him?" "No. I told him I'd ask you first." My blood ran cold. "Mom, listen to me. Do not give him anything. Not a copy. Not a scan. Nothing. But Spencer, he said. I don't care what he said. That document is not his to touch. Later that night, I drove back out to the house. It was dark by the time I arrived, and as I pulled up, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a for sale sign planted on the front lawn. I marched up to the porch, heart pounding, and knocked hard enough to rattle the frame. Amelia opened the door, blinking like I'd just woken her up from a dream. What's the sign for? I asked. She looked startled, then forced a smile. Oh, it's just a backup plan. Nathan has some ideas. We figured if we could sell this place and downsize, we could use the equity to invest. Equity? I repeated, stunned. You don't own anything. Nathan appeared behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. We were going to talk to you about that. No, I snapped. You were going to go behind my back again. Try to manipulate Mom into handing over paperwork. Move my parents out of the house I bought for them so you could fund your own plans. He stepped forward. Spencer, don't act like you're some hero. You live in the city. You drop in once every few months and expect everything to stay perfect? Mom and Dad need support, day-to-day support, and we've been here. We've been doing the hard work. You've been squatting, I said, and calling it sacrifice. Amelia's voice shook. You don't understand what it's like, trying to build something from scratch. We needed a place. A fresh start. So you stole theirs? Nathan bristled. It's not stealing. It's family. Things change. People adjust. It's not our fault they don't need this space anymore. At that moment, I realized they genuinely believed it. That somehow, my act of generosity had turned into an open invitation. That my parents' silence had become consent. That Nathan saw their aging and uncertainty as an opportunity. I nodded slowly. You're right. Things do change. And with that, I turned around and walked back to my car. Because I knew what I had to do next. But not before one final betrayal hit, like a sucker punch the very next morning. I didn't sleep the night I saw the for sale sign on the lawn. I couldn't. I paced the hotel room like a caged animal, flipping through emails, rereading legal clauses, rereading my own texts with Mom like I could somehow rewrite history if I just stared long enough. But the truth wouldn't change. My brother had taken something pure, something I did out of love, and warped it into leverage. A tool. A pawn in whatever scheme he was playing at. The next morning, I drove back to the house before the sun even came up. I parked 2 houses down, just far enough not to be seen. I watched the porch lights blink on. I watched Amelia step out in a robe, cup of coffee in hand, as if nothing in the world could touch her. I stayed until Dad shuffled out from the garage, back hunched, dragging a plastic bag of trash behind him. The image of my father, once this towering figure who could fix anything with calloused hands and a wrench, now reduced to this silent tenant, broke something in me. That was my breaking point. But breaking isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's not a scream, but a slow inhale. Sometimes it's not revenge, it's resolve. I didn't confront them that day. I didn't storm in. I didn't wave the deed like a sword. I just drove home, gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and started making calls. Not dramatic calls. Quiet ones. A real estate attorney. A financial advisor. My accountant. A notary. My mentor from college who knew a guy who dealt with domestic equity squatters, as he called them. I took notes. I listened more than I spoke. I kept everything tight and close to the chest. Because the more I realized how deep Nathan had his claws in, the more I knew I couldn't afford to act impulsively. That week, I hit rock bottom. Not financially. I was still doing fine on paper. My job was stable. My savings untouched. But emotionally, spiritually, it was like a sinkhole had opened beneath everything I thought was solid. My chest felt heavy. My appetite vanished. Work felt meaningless. I'd built a life with the goal of taking care of the people who mattered most, and somehow, doing exactly that had left me completely powerless. I couldn't eat without picturing my mom folding laundry in silence. I couldn't sleep without seeing Dad curled up on a garage cot like a forgotten uncle. And worse, I kept second-guessing myself. Maybe I had overstepped by buying them the house. Maybe Nathan was right. Maybe I should have consulted the whole family first. Maybe I'd embarrassed Dad by making such a big gesture. Maybe Mom hadn't told me the whole truth because she didn't want to hurt me, not because Nathan was hiding anything. I spiraled so hard I almost deleted the deed file from my computer, like that would somehow undo the whole thing. But then, something changed. It was Mom. She called me 3 days later. Her voice was small, like she was speaking from inside a closet. "I just wanted you to know," she said, "that we're proud of you, even if we don't say it enough. And no matter what your brother says, your father and I know what you did for us." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, unable to speak. "I saw the sign," she added after a pause. "On the lawn." I closed my eyes. "I didn't put it there." "I know," she said. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing. Could almost picture her standing at the kitchen window, cordless phone in one hand, staring out at the backyard she barely got to use. "You do what you need to do," she said. "We'll be okay." And just like that, I stopped spiraling. Because I remembered who I was. I wasn't Nathan. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to manipulate. I didn't need to be seen as the favorite. I just needed to move forward. Carefully, quietly, permanently. So I began to rebuild. First, I cleaned up everything I'd let fall behind while obsessing over the house. I restructured my work calendar, got back into my morning workouts, even started cooking again. Simple meals, nothing fancy, but it made me feel grounded. I reconnected with some old college friends. Signed up for a local mentorship program where I could teach financial literacy to at-risk teens. I didn't tell anyone in my family about it. It was for me. A reminder that my value wasn't measured in how others used me, but in how I chose to show up. Second, I moved forward with legal protections. I had the deed officially recorded under my name, added clauses preventing unauthorized occupation, and created a revocable trust that could allow my parents to remain in the home indefinitely, but no one else. I updated my estate plan, made it watertight. My lawyer, a calm woman named Marla with gray-streaked hair and eyes like polished steel, reviewed every clause like she was preparing for war. "You're doing the right thing," she told me, sliding the papers back across the table. "And you're doing it the right way. Quiet is stronger than loud, Spencer. Don't forget that." The third thing I did, I visited my parents, this time with a plan. I didn't tell Nathan. I didn't tell Amelia. I waited until a weekday when I knew he'd be at work and she'd be out at her so-called boutique meetings. I texted Mom and said I was coming by for tea. She replied with a heart emoji. That meant yes. When I arrived, she was waiting on the porch. Her hair was pulled back, her cardigan neat. She looked like someone trying hard to hold things together. Dad came out a few minutes later, wiping his hands on an old rag like he'd just been working on something, probably organizing junk in the garage because he didn't have a workshop anymore. We didn't talk about Nathan. Not right away. Instead, I made them lunch. Tuna salad sandwiches, like Mom used to make when I was a kid. We sat in the backyard. Birds chirped. The sky was clear. For a moment, it felt like what I wanted this house to feel like, a gift, a safe place. When we finished eating, I handed Dad a folder. "What's this?" he asked, flipping through the pages. "Legal protections," I said simply. "You're not going to get pushed around anymore. Not by anyone. Not even family." Mom glanced at me. "Will this make things worse?" "No," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. "It'll make them real." Dad didn't say much. He just nodded and kept reading. Later, as I was leaving, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You didn't need to do all this, son." "I know," I said. "That's why I did." That night, I sat on my balcony, sipping tea, and feeling, for the first time in weeks, a sense of calm. Not peace exactly. The storm was still coming. But I was no longer adrift. I was steering now, and I had a plan. Because what Nathan didn't know was that the house he tried to sell wasn't his to list. That the equity he wanted to tap into didn't exist for him. That every paper trail led to me, and every legal move he thought he could make had already been blocked off. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just waited. Waited for him to make the final mistake that would give me everything I needed to end this cleanly. And it came faster than I thought. It was the email that did it. Just 4 days after I'd had that lunch with Mom and Dad, I got a message forwarded from my real estate attorney, Marla. She'd been monitoring any activity linked to the property title at my request, and this one hit her radar like a siren. A digital submission request from a local mortgage broker trying to run a preliminary valuation on the house for pre-approval purposes. The borrower? Nathan Lowell. I stared at the screen, while rising in my throat. The request wasn't for a casual inquiry. It included scanned ID documents, his and Amelia's, pay stubs, and worst of all, a typed note in the broker's comment section that read, "This is a family-owned home, unencumbered. We live here and will be using it as collateral for the down payment on our new business location. Happy to provide anything else. Our home. We live here. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. He was trying to use the house, my house, gifted in spirit to our parents, as leverage for a loan, without telling me, and without a shred of legal right to do so. The gall of it was staggering. But beneath the fury, I felt something steadier, colder. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Marla called me as soon as I texted her. He's overreached, she said simply. You've got more than enough grounds now. This isn't just disrespectful, it's attempted fraud. I want to do this right, I said. No drama. No headlines. Just clean. Quiet. But permanent. Then you need a setup, she replied. And I have an idea. What followed was a 3-hour call that felt more like a strategy session for a corporate takeover than a family dispute. But I listened. I took notes. I did my homework. And slowly, a plan began to form. Not for revenge, exactly, but for removal. The first thing I did was upgrade the legal shield around the house. Marla helped me file a notarized affidavit of ownership and occupancy intent, then worked with a local judge to issue a notice of unauthorized occupancy, which we held in reserve for the perfect moment. The house wasn't being rented. Mom and Dad weren't listed as tenants, but as occupants with my written permission. That mattered, because it meant that anyone else, namely Nathan and Amelia, were unofficial at best and trespassers at worst. Meanwhile, I added cameras to the outside of the house. Not hidden ones, legal ones. I hired a professional installation team and framed it as updating my parents' home security, which, in part, was true. I made sure the cameras faced the front porch, the garage door, the side yard, and, most importantly, the driveway. That's where the black SUV always parked. Nathan's. The second thing I did, I gave Mom and Dad a vacation. They didn't want to go at first. Said they couldn't leave things like this. But I insisted. Paid for a 2-week stay at a quiet beachside rental I'd used myself before. Private, clean, fully stocked, and completely off Nathan's radar. They left on a Thursday morning, and by Friday evening, Nathan was already texting them. Where are you? Why is there a lock on the garage door? Did you talk to Spencer again? I watched from my phone as the footage came in. Amelia pacing the porch. Nathan muttering to himself in the driveway, trying to get a signal. He hadn't noticed the cameras yet. Or maybe he had, and just assumed they were Dad's idea. Either way, he wasn't subtle. There was yelling. Phone calls. At one point, he even brought 2 guys over to help move furniture, though they never went inside. Just circled the SUV and eventually drove off when no one opened the door. He didn't have a key. I made sure of that months ago. That weekend, I called in the next piece of the plan, the witness. Her name was Mrs. Aguilar. She lived across the street and had known my parents for years. She was the kind of neighbor who knew everything, who got home when, who mowed their lawn, who left lights on all night. I remembered her from my childhood as the woman who gave out full-size candy bars on Halloween and once bandaged my scraped knee with a kitchen towel and prayer. She hadn't been thrilled with Nathan's move-in, especially after the loud music, the sudden guests, and the time Amelia parked across her driveway and acted like she was the one being inconvenienced. When I showed up at her front door, she welcomed me with a knowing smile and an iced tea. I was wondering when you'd come back, she said. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting once. And when I finally asked if she'd be willing to provide a witness statement about what she'd seen, the parties, the cars, Nathan saying things like, "We own this place now," to delivery drivers, she didn't hesitate. Honey, she said, you just point me at the notary. The next part was trickier, getting Nathan to put it in writing. So I created a fake opportunity. Nothing illegal, just a gentle push. I had an old friend, Jared, who worked in real estate development. I asked him to pose as a private buyer interested in residential investment properties. He reached out to Nathan via LinkedIn, pretending to be looking for a place to flip or co-invest in. And that's when Nathan took the bait. They had coffee. Nathan bragged. And within 2 days, Jared had an email chain in which Nathan claimed to own full control of a home his family transferred over informally. He even attached photos of the interior. Photos I had paid for. With my staging. Now I had everything I needed. The footage. The false claim to ownership. The witness. The paper trail. The next step was execution. Marla drafted the official notice of unauthorized occupancy. We filed it with the county, posted a copy on the front door, and sent a digital copy to Nathan's email, with legal language so airtight even the most delusional person couldn't pretend it was optional. The notice gave him 72 hours to vacate the property, remove any belongings, and cease representing the house as his own, or face formal legal proceedings. It was delivered on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. By 9:17, my phone rang. It was Nathan. "You think this is funny?" he snapped before I even said hello. "No," I replied calmly. "I think it's overdue. You're kicking your own brother out of mom and dad's house." "It's not their house, Nathan," I said. "It's mine, and they were guests of honor. You were an invader. You're overreacting. This is just a misunderstanding." "Really? Then why were you trying to use it as loan collateral?" Silence. "I have the email," I added. "From the broker. From Jared. From you. Want me to keep going?" More silence. "Then, they need us. You think they'll be okay without us there?" "They already are," I said. "They're on vacation. You didn't even notice." I could almost hear the blood drain from his face. "And when they come back," I continued, "they'll have a fully restored home with no tension, no arguments, no fake house tours, and no one sleeping in the garage. You'll regret this." "No," I said, "you will." And I hung up. But I wasn't done yet. The last part of the plan was the one I took the most care with, the return. Mom and Dad came back a few days later to a completely cleaned and reset house. I'd brought in a cleaning crew, repainted the garage, restored their original bedroom setup, restocked the pantry, and even left a small welcome back card on the kitchen table with a note. "Your home is yours again. Love, Spencer." Mom called me in tears. Dad didn't say much, just grunted in that emotional way he does when words aren't enough. But the relief in his voice, that said everything. Nathan, meanwhile, had gone radio silent, which was just fine, because the final move was still coming. The silence after Nathan's last phone call didn't feel triumphant. It felt like the moment right before a storm breaks, heavy, electric, almost too still. I wasn't celebrating anything yet, because Nathan was the type of person who didn't back down until the world physically forced him to. He always needed a final blow to convince him the fight was actually over. That blow came faster than even I expected. On the morning of the 72-hour deadline, he showed up at the house before sunrise. I know because the cameras caught everything. Him stomping up the walkway, rattling the door handle, ringing the bell 5, 6, 7 times in a row. When no one answered, he grabbed his phone and started pacing across the porch, muttering into the speaker. Then he spotted the notice taped across the door. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. He ripped it off and read every line. I watched his jaw move as he traced the words with his eyes. Unauthorized occupancy. Cease and desist. Immediate removal. Owner retains sole authority. Legal action pending. He crumpled the notice in his fist, threw it into the flower bed, and stormed back to his SUV. He revved the engine hard enough to make the camera shake. Then he peeled out of the driveway like a man trying to outrun reality. It was the most peaceful morning the house had seen in months. But revenge, real, clean revenge, isn't about catching someone in a moment of panic. It's about letting their own choices close the door behind them. 2 days later, I got a frantic voicemail from Amelia. "Spencer, please call me back. This is all a misunderstanding. Nathan didn't mean." Well, he didn't know. Okay, he should have known. But we didn't realize the paperwork wasn't. Just please call me. I didn't. Another voicemail came an hour later. Then a text. "We need to talk. Please." I didn't answer that either. Because the next step wasn't about talking. It was about clarification. Marla and I moved forward with the final action. A formal filing with the county that barred Nathan and Amelia from making any claim on the property, plus a record of attempted fraudulent representation for a secured loan. It wasn't a criminal case. I didn't want one, but it was an official mark on their financial record. Just enough to keep lenders wary. Just enough that any future, "we own the place," conversations would be met with a side eye from anyone with a license. We also filed a no trespass order on the property on behalf of myself, Mom, and Dad. When the sheriff's office delivered it, I heard from Mrs. Aguilar later. Nathan stood in the driveway arguing with the deputy until the man finally said, "Sir, the more you talk, the worse this looks." That finally shut him up. Meanwhile, I kept focusing on the rise. The mentorship program I had joined, teaching financial basics to teens, was unexpectedly grounding. Those kids reminded me of myself at that age. Quiet, unsure, overlooked. They asked questions I wish someone had answered for me when I was 16. Watching them light up when they understood taxes or savings or compound interest made me feel good, like I was building something real. I also started taking mom and dad out more. Sunday breakfasts, movie nights, trips to the farmer's market. They relaxed in ways I didn't even know they'd forgotten. Mom stopped wringing her hands. Dad's shoulders loosened. The house felt like theirs again, not a battlefield, but a home. One afternoon, a month after the eviction, we sat on the porch sipping iced tea while the sun dipped behind the trees. Mom glanced over at me and said softly, "I didn't know how much weight we were carrying until it was gone." That sentence alone made every sleepless night worth it. Nathan stayed quiet for a while, and I thought maybe he'd learn from this, or at least let it go. I was wrong. He reached out again, this time with a message so long I had to scroll 3 times. It started with excuses. "You blindsided us. We were trying to build a future." Then accusations. "You wanted to make us look bad. You enjoy being the hero." Then guilt. "Mom and dad will be alone when they need help, and you won't be there." Then finally, a confession wrapped in arrogance. "I deserve the house more than you ever did. I'm the one who stayed." I stared at the last line for a while. Stayed. As if staying was the same as sacrificing. As if proximity made him more loving, more worthy, more helpful. It didn't. If anything, his staying had created the exact cage mom and dad were living in when I found them. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Some people aren't meant to be fought. They're meant to be excluded. But the real fallout came when Amelia called my mother. Not me. My mother. I only knew because Mom called me afterward, voice trembling between frustration and disbelief. She said, "Mom began carefully, that you humiliated them, that you're selfish, that you ruined their plans." I took a long breath. "What did you tell her?" Mom hesitated. Then her voice steadied. "I told her the same thing I told your brother. This house was never theirs. It was never up for debate. And if they need a place to stay, they should start by finding one they can afford." I pictured my quiet, gentle mother saying that with her soft voice and steady eyes. And I felt something warm press against my ribs. Pride. Real, bone-deep pride. She continued, "And I told her if they ever set foot on our property again without your permission, I will call the sheriff myself." I had to sit down after that. Not because of the drama, but because my mother, the woman who apologized when someone stepped on her foot, had found her voice again. And she wasn't giving it back. Life settled into place after that. Nathan and Amelia moved to a small rental 2 towns over. His business loan was denied, not because of me directly, but because the lender flagged him as a misrepresentative applicant. Amelia's boutique plan stalled. They stopped showing up unannounced. Stopped calling. Stopped pretending. Mom and dad regained space, independence, and dignity. Dad started working on small woodworking projects in the garage again. His garage, not a makeshift bedroom. Mom replanted her herb garden. They hosted dinners again, invited their friends over, filled the house with laughter instead of tension. The home I meant for them was finally theirs in spirit. And me? I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, solid, like the ground beneath me was finally level. One evening, I sat with Dad on the porch. He was whittling something small, a bird, I think, and I asked quietly, "Do you think Nathan will ever understand?" Dad paused, then shook his head. "Some folks don't learn until life teaches them. And sometimes life teaches them the same lesson over and over until it sticks." "Do you think it'll stick this time?" He smiled faintly. "If it doesn't, that's not your burden anymore." And he was right. Nathan's path was no longer tied to mine, or my parents', or the house he tried to steal. Everyone had finally returned to the roles they'd chosen. Mom and Dad, free. Me, standing firm. And Nathan, facing the consequences of being the one who stayed for all the wrong reasons. The last time I drove away from the house after Sunday dinner, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, calm, steady, unshaken, and realized something that made the corners of my mouth lift. I hadn't just taken the house back. I'd taken my peace back, and I wasn't ever giving it away again.